This story happened to me in the village when I was visiting a friend. I was 14 years old at the time, and my friend and I often spent time together. It happened that we could sit up late and watch movies, listen to music, and just have fun. I could stay at her house overnight since my house was across the street. It was a normal, familiar thing for me. Her parents loved me so much and enjoyed my visits. My parents didn't mind either. My mom always said, "It's better to stay at a friend's house than to go home late at night." So where am I going with this? The point is that I often stayed overnight at her parents' house, and on this horrible day, we slept at her grandmother's house. Just a normal summer day. My friend and I had been everywhere we could in the village. We sat by the river, dreaming about the future, discussing acquaintances and other girls from school. We watched a movie, cooked dinner together with her mother, and ate tightly, and the day was coming to an end. I was thinking of even getting up right after dinner and getting ready to go to my place because it was still light, but her mom noticed that I was already ready and turned to me with a sweet smile and said, "Girls, could you go to my parents' house now and stay there? Since my dad has gone to a neighboring village on business, my mom is alone now, and I'll be calmer that way, and she misses Alice. What do you say?" I could tell from the look on Alice's face that she didn't really want to go to her grandmother's house, but she couldn't argue with her mother and agreed. At that moment, I started to feel a little less cheerful. Some strange longing ran through my soul, but I couldn't say no, especially not to my best friend's grandmother. There will be something else new, thought I, and cheerfully began to pack a bag. Alice's grandparents' house was about 7 houses down the street from her parents' house, so we arrived at Grandma Alice's house, handed over the goodies, had tea, and everything was fine. This house seemed even cozier and nicer to me than Alice's house. I think it was all the vintage furniture, the smell of washed clothes, the fireplace, the red tablecloth with beige flowers, and the well-fed white cat. Grandma was very happy to see us. She got us all the sweets she had stashed away for special occasions. We talked to her about everything. We were having a good time. We never noticed how dark it got. The wall clock showed 9 vours. There was a kind of chime that reminded us that it was time for the hosts to go to bed. I also thought that I should ask my dad to buy a clock like that too. We went upstairs to Alice's room. Grandma said she was going to finish up in the kitchen and come up to our room to sleep on the 2nd floor. And there was another room across the hall. I think it was a bedroom. Alice and I went up to bed. The room had one bed, a rather large bed against the wall, a desk table, books, and some of Alice's toys. This room was cooler than the others. It was very noticeable, as if a window had been open all day and only recently closed. But we wanted to sleep, so we lay down with Alice on this bed. It was already warm. We lay there for a while and talked about something and fell asleep. I slept very soundly, but it felt like I was awake. It was like that when you sleep in someone else's house, as if your body was relaxed and your brain was still on alert. I woke up apparently half an hour or 15 minutes after I'd fallen asleep to noises downstairs in the kitchen. I could hear Alice and Grandma talking quietly. They were doing the dishes. I opened my eyes fully. The door of the room was open. The next door was open, and there was a lamp burning dimly, illuminating the room and a little of the hallway. Alice's room was a little light from that lamp too, but it didn't keep me from falling back asleep either. I rolled over onto my back and covered myself completely with the blanket. I was getting hot under the blanket. I stuck my arms out so they were hanging off the bed, and I drifted off to sleep. After a couple minutes, all of a sudden, I felt someone's hand come down on mine and slip down as if diving back under the bed. I immediately thought of Alice, but I could hear her voice downstairs. Everything clenched inside. My whole body felt like it died for a moment. And my brain was in such a panic that it wanted to get me out of this room fast. I wanted to scream, but my brain prevented it, as if whispering to me, "Don't move, don't move, freeze." I wanted to sob, to scream in terror, to call my mom and dad and take refuge with them. But I realized they weren't there. I began to shiver. My whole body felt a coldness that words cannot describe. I just lay there and didn't move. The most horrible thing that could happen later was that something would open my bedspread, my only shelter from this horror, and reveal itself. I didn't want to believe it, and I was sure that if I didn't move and close my eyes and said a prayer, it would go away. My mom would come and take me away from this horrible hell. It seemed like about 5 to 7 minutes passed as my hand that had been touched, dangling from the bed, became just freakishly icy. It seemed as if I had already renounced that hand, as if I had sacrificed it to save my life. But I decided to risk opening my eyes and trying to pull my hand back. As soon as I opened my eyes and slowly pulled my hand back to me, I noticed a slight breeze over my hand, as if someone was blowing on it from above. I froze again in horror. I was desperate. I couldn't even call for help. I seemed to have lost the ability to make sounds. But the boon, I began to hear footsteps coming toward me more clearly. Then I became braver. I wanted to jump out of bed and run toward Alice and Grandma. But I realized that I couldn't, and the important thing now was to wait for people. It was the same cold in the room, and I was sure that something was still in the room with me, watching me. The footsteps came closer and closer. I could hear the heavy breathing of Alice's grandmother, and I recognized Alice's gait. Then I decided to open my eyes and lift the blanket. I did it so abruptly that I was frightened myself. I stopped and slowly began to lift the blanket. As soon as the room came into view, I noticed the silhouette sitting at Alice's desk looking right at me. To say that I was terrified was an understatement. I froze and closed my eyes. After a couple of minutes, there was a click, and again a hand touched my arm, and a much tighter grip on my arm. I wrenched my hand away, jumped out of bed, crawled into a corner, and screamed in a horrible voice that made me afraid. I screamed and fought back with my hands without opening my eyes, crying, cursing, and calling for help from my mom and dad. Suddenly I noticed screams too. It was Alice screaming. Grandmother was also running in our direction. I opened my eyes and did not notice how Alice was on the bed with me and was hugging me, also crying and calling grandmother. She came running in wailing, breathless to us, hugged us, and tried to calm us down. Time passed, and we were already sitting in the kitchen drinking tea without talking. Grandmother did not move away from us. We just kept quiet. By then I had told them everything. Alice had already called her parents. We were waiting for our relatives.